Welcome back to the channel today, you guys, and we're going to be showing you how we created this in After Effects. Let's just get straight into it. Alright, you guys, well, we're back on the channel today, and this is going to be one of those workflow videos where I'm going to show you how I created this explosion clip in After Effects. You guys really like watching me kind of go through this process, so you know me, not too much talking. Let's get straight into it and show you guys what I did. So first thing I'm going to do is bring in one of these assets. I already rotoscoped out the person earlier because I just didn't want to wait for it during the tutorial, so we just got that out the way. And let me just scale this down a tad bit. And if you're doing this and there was movement in the scene, like the clip on Instagram that I have, just 3D track it. It's the same idea, just have to rotoscope a few things to get it where you want it to be. But nonetheless, the first thing we're going to do is use this match levels plugin. Actually, we can try and do this one of two ways, but we'll go on the match levels plugin. It's a free plugin. You can download it online. I'll put a link to it in the description so that you guys can find it, but it's a really good plugin for matching stuff, especially when you're doing it with log footage. So we're going to choose the output blacks, being something in the scene that matches around what this would be. So let's try something over, like over here. You know what, I have that on the wrong layer, so let's take that off there. Sorry about that. Let's put the match levels back on here, and let's choose something around over here. So the blacks over here, the cracks should be something like that. And then for the white, we'll choose something in the sky over here. And we should have something that looks fairly decent for now, where we're trying to start to get this into the scene. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to add a curves effect. And I'm just going to go over to this red channel because I can see there's a bit of red inside of here. And let's bring that down a tad bit. Maybe something like this. Not too sure. I'm just trying to get a good look at it to make sure it's fairly balanced inside the scene. I think something like that works. And then let's add one more curves effect, and I'm just going to test it out because I'm not too certain, but let's try and go to where the blues are, and let's try and lift the blues a tad bit. No. Not liking the way that looks, so we're going to keep this here for now. So what we can do is we can delete that actually, and then I'm going to go over to my tritone effect, and we are going to sample something that's on the floor, actually around over here. And if you see, we can blend with the original to try and get it to sit somewhere a bit better inside of the scene. So maybe something around over here can work. And the other thing is it's too saturated probably for this footage anyway, so let's drop it down to about, I don't know, probably around 60. 60 is like my love spot when I do stuff like this, so I'm going to drop it to about 60. And if I run a quick playthrough over here, this is okay for what we're doing so far. He turns around, and this is where the rocks would be coming from the floor. And a good way to see it too is I usually look at it when it's flat coming up, and if it blends fairly well, then I kind of just go with that and move forward until I get to the end, and then I'll just make things look pretty around that point. And then even for here, as you can see, the floor has quite a bit of blur over there, so the last thing we're going to do over here is we're going to put a camera lens blur effect on here. I usually put the roundness all the way to 100, and we're going to play with this maybe around 1 for now. No, we're going to go 2, and I think 2 is fair. Maybe 2.5 might be more fair for what we're doing in this clip, for where it's located, and I think something like that's pretty decent for now. I don't think we need to push it any further than that. Yeah, so let's move on to the next part. Let's bring in this explosion clip over here, and we're just going to put it underneath the meteor clip. Put it around over here, something around here. Should be pretty good. And we're going to scale this up. Oops, you know what? We're going to put this over here, press Y, and we're going to put the anchor point at the bottom so it scales from that point specifically. So that explosion would be way too small for where it is. So we're just going to scale this up, scale this up, scale this up, and have it something like this behind it. And instead of going through that whole headache of trying to match this again, what we'll do is going to copy all of those effects and we're just going to paste it on the fire, and this should blend it in pretty damn well into the scene. And then the colors, like I said, we'll look back into that afterwards to see where it's at in case there's something we want to change and whatnot. But even here, we'll see, like I said, but I might change that to more of like a yellowish color. But once it's not desaturated, I'll get a better idea of where that fire is going to be. But even here, I'll jump back in to around hue and saturation, and this gives me a better idea of where the fire is at. Actually, you know what? Wrong clip. We're going to go here, close this, close that, close that. Yeah, there we go. This gives me a way better idea of where the fire actually is in the clip, and I think something around here kind of matches. And here's a cool thing too, you guys, if you didn't know, I think it's, which is the standard. Okay, so if you go over here, you can see the saturation values at the top right where it says RGBA, and that's telling me where it sits for the saturation in the scene. So 20,000, 19, 13. If I go back over here, we're going to see 20,000, 19, 13. So the blues are quite high in here, but we have the colors pretty saturated, pretty close to the other clip, so I'm not too worried about that. So that guess was pretty damn good for what we did in regards to that. So, and then, so we have the timing off. Boom. So we're going to bring both of these over, and then the explosion on the floor, whoops, explosion on the floor, we need to bring it back over here, and let's retime this to about maybe 70 instead to make it a bit faster. I think something like that's fine for now. Yeah, something like this is fine for now. I'm not going to be picky. We're just going to leave that alone. So we got a decent little playthrough showing kind of where we're going with this clip already. So that's pretty damn good. And for this clip here, let's scale it up. Sorry, let's scale up the ground just a tad bit more. Let's put it back on top over here. I think that's obscuring it a little better. I think I like that a lot better with this clip. Okay, perfect. So I guess the next thing we're going to be doing is, this is all inside of log space, so we can't even really see the colors, which is tricky in itself. But what I do want to do is I want to create the glow that happens over here when this comes out. So we're actually going to create a new adjustment layer, and let's rename this one Fire Glow. Perfect. And then we're going to grab an ellipse tool, the mask tool, on that adjustment layer. We're just going to draw a nice circle right around where the explosion takes place. And then we're going to add the deep glow effect. Sorry about that. We're going to add deep glow effect to it. As you can see, that's blown out. Looks horrible. Don't worry about that. What we're going to do first is go to the mask, double M, and let's just feather this out to maybe like 500, 600, something like that. I don't know. Maybe even more. So maybe around here. Okay, perfect. We're going to put that radius up to 2000, and that just lets it bleed out more. The exposure, let's put it down to 0.25 for now. We'll see where we bring it when we get a little further in. Let's go somewhere in between. Right over here is pretty good. And we're going to make this saturation bias. We're going to transition smooth this thing right around here, and then the saturation bias is, it's going to only kind of attack the areas that have more saturation, which is the fire, which I think is a better idea. Then we turn up the exposure a bit. Maybe something like this will work. And then so we're going to go to where the beginning of the clip happens over here. We're going to delete that part. See where the explosion ends, which is probably something around over here. And we're just going to put a few keyframes over here. So press T for opacity. We're going to put one here, and it comes up, it's in full effect right here, right? So we're going to put another one, then we're just going to copy these, go to the end of the clip, paste them, and then we're just going to switch the position of both these keyframes just to let it bleed out a tad bit more over here. And then when it starts, we're going to have it at 0, right? And then when it ends, we're going to have it at 0 again. So when this plays, as you can see, we want it to kind of focus more on this area here when the explosion takes place, which should make it look a lot better once we put the stuff where we want it to be. So another thing is too, I want to put this in the Rec 709 workspace. So over here, we're going to add a, actually, you know what? We'll do this a different way. So I want to, sometimes when you put a glow before your color grading, it really affects the way the glow actually works. So I'm going to actually try and switch this and put it on top so that we don't have it interfere too much with how it looks. So we'll take this off for now, and we're going to add an adjustment layer over here, and we're going to name this grade. Perfect. And now that we're done that part, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a levels effect. So let's start with the levels. And here we're going to be crushing the levels to get them back to where they should be normally. So you want your highlights, something around over here, and we're going to pull our darks down to around this area. And let's add some contrast back into our scene. So something around over here should be fairly decent, kind of like in the way it's looking so far. The only other issue I'd say we're having right now is that the saturation is off inside of the image. So we are going to add a hue and saturation effect. And let's turn up the saturation inside the clip. Maybe something around a little too rich for my liking, maybe around the 40% mark. I think that looks pretty damn good. And then the fire, I'm not a fan of how the fire is too desaturated, so we're going to bring back some more life into our fire. And then what we're going to do, what I said before, is we're going to go to the master hue and saturation. So that's like red, orangish kind of color. So we'll take that and we'll change it to more of a yellowish orange color, like something around here is what I'm a fan of. I like that a lot better. I think that looks good. And now that we have that grade layer over here, we have the saturation kind of pulled up a tad bit inside the scene. And I'm looking at the greens. The greens look super dull inside the scene. So what we can try and do is head over to the greens and let's see where the saturation is inside of it. Let's keep it to around over here. As you can see, it's not really affecting that part. Maybe I'm tripping. Maybe I am tripping. No, I'm not. Okay. I will come back to that after. But the green hue, I'm not sure why it's not affecting it at all. But we will get back to that afterwards. So the hue and saturation for now, pretty fine with. The next thing we're going to do is go to Lumetri color. We're going to go to basic over here, and we're just going to look at where the contrast is inside the image. I feel like we can deal with a tad bit more contrast. Looks like it's pretty dull. The shadows, darken them a tad bit. And then our highlights, let's see where our highlights are at. Something around over here should be fine. And if you guys look, like that's where we started and that's where we're at already. So you can see the difference that just doing something like this can make with bringing your footage back to life. So I'm pretty damn happy with how that's looking for now. What we will do though is we'll add a curves effect. This is where you can really play around with stuff. And for the red, we can take away a bit of this red here, just to give it a bit of a tint for the color grade, and go to our blues. Add a little bit of blue to the scene, and as you can see, it's taking away from that warmth and kind of bringing it back to an even white balance, and I'm a fan of this. I like this. I think I like where we're going with this. So I think things are going in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. And as you guys, like I said before, if you turn on the glow, you can see what's happening here. Boom, the explosion comes up, and even here, I can tell you this. We can pull this back, have it right here. Bam. And then we can have the glow kind of emulate more over here. And we could play with the threshold, the radius and stuff, the exposure, to see how bright we want it to be during the scene. So, like I said, something around, I like when it's kind of glowing there. Threshold smooth, we want it maybe a little higher, wanted a smoother glow going through. And then, like we said earlier, the saturation bias is I think a lot better, something around over here. And then we can play with the mask. The feather is really what's going to sell how it rolls off inside the scene. So something around here. And as you guys can see, if we take it on and off, it makes a huge difference when you're watching how it affects, especially over here inside your image. You can see it bleeding over the rocks, which naturally would happen if fire was behind it. So just a quick tip for how you can composite something like this if you were trying to do something similar. And then let's see what else we can do with this. Got the fire glow there. Let me think. Okay. Well, we can add a bit of a vignette now. So we're going to rename this vignette. I hope I spelled that right, but it's all good. So we're going to do a couple things here. We're going to turn this into, so first we're going to draw an ellipse tool over here, just so we can get the focus more on this area. Then we're going to grab this, and this is where the light direction is coming from. So we're going to do something like around over here. Then we're going to add a curves effect on here, and we're just going to add some contrast and darken out this area. And this just brings the focus back more to this spot. We're going to invert it. We're going to feather it. Maybe something like 250. And then we're going to change that blending mode to soft light. Bam. You can see it adds some contrast to the scene, and it brings the focus back over here. So as you can see, bam, bam, bam. Very subtle, but very effective. So, well done. And we're just going to feather it a tad bit more because I think it looks pretty good if we did that. And then another thing we're going to do is we're going to add some RGB as a separation here. We are going to use RGB by Red Giant. And this is a cool effect because it adds like that distortion that a lens would normally have. So definitely something you should give a try if you're doing something like this. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to get this ellipse tool. We're going to put it around the middle, something around over here. We're going to invert it, bring up that mask again. Let's put it to about 250-ish, like 250, 300, something in between there is a really good area. And the radius we're going to put to 2. And the distortion we'll put to about maybe like 1, something around there. And it just adds that tad bit of distortion to the edge of your frame. You can probably see it here. Really cool little effect. Yeah, makes the image look pretty damn cool as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, that part. And then the coolest part after this is actually getting some noise inside of here. Actually, we'll just rename this noise in the layer. And we're going to go to film nitrate over here. And we're going to use this one. Yeah, like that. The film chroma, we're going to put it up to maybe 50. Maybe leave this to about 50 over here. And as you guys can see, it's just adding some cool noise to your footage. This is what really helps kind of blend in visual effects too. If you don't have something like this on, it's like you can kind of see where everything separates, but that noise pattern is what naturally emulates from camera. So I think it's a good idea to have something in there. And then I might, because it's me, LUT. We're gonna add one more creative LUT, and this is more so something that I like. It's from a package I have. The distant teal. Yeah, I like this one. I really like this LUT. I think it's really cool. It's only because I think it's cool that I'm putting it, so not much of a deeper reason. But yeah, I think we have a pretty damn solid take on this. The only other thing I guess we can do is we're going to put a slight glow on the footage just to wrap it all around, and we're going to do this through we're going to do this through looks. Sorry, I don't know why I paused like that. It's crazy. No, bad reference frame to be working off of. Okay, so we're going to stand around here. And I like these. I like some of these, I'm not going to lie to you. But I'm far past that, so there's no point in me really going down that direction. And we're going to use a subtle bloom. Sorry, my cat's going crazy in the background. We're going to ProMist. We're going to do half on the ProMist filter. Sometimes I like playing with Mojo. Just depends on how nicely it complements the image, but we'll try just a bit of Mojo today. And boom, as you guys can see, it just softens up some of the parts of the image. And then the optical diffusion adds a bit of like a soft spill going into the image. I think there's just a bit too much for my liking. I didn't even notice I added an anamorphic flare to there. We can do a subtle warm one. And we'll see what happens with that one. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I'll leave this here. No, I do not like that. So what we will do is we'll take it off the anamorphic flare here. And I have an idea for it though. Then we'll duplicate this and we'll put flare on this layer instead. We'll edit this one and we'll delete both of these. And we're going to put a subtle warm flare, and we're just going to turn down. You know what, the threshold is probably way too high too. Probably something around here. Bam. And then we're just going to cut off this part of it. Apologies, I should have deleted the anamorphic flare off of this one too. We're just going to hit the check mark. That's what I should have done. Perfect. And opacity, we're going to keyframe it to come back on around that time. Yeah. Something around here. And I don't see it a lot right now. So we'll go back in here and we will turn this up a tad bit. The threshold might be too low on it. Oh, there it is. No, boost it. Something around here should be fine. Okay, so when that goes off, I wanted the anamorphic flare to kind of follow through on it. And even here for our fire glow, what we can do is we can go to the tint, we can go to monocolor, we can select something that's the color of the orange that we're looking for, maybe something around over here. I don't like that. No, it's too much, too ugly. Maybe the spill can be something around over there. And yeah, as you can see, the fire glow here and there, and that looks pretty damn good as far as I'm concerned. And there's a couple other things that we can do to really bring this to life too, and I will show you what that is. So I'm going to duplicate the explosion, bring it up here, and we're going to call this relight matte. Then we're going to duplicate the main layer over here, and we're going to call this, we're going to rename it ground relights. And we're making a matte on the floor so that this explosion will actually show over here. So I'll show you what we're actually doing here. So we're going to solo the ground relight layer over here. We're going to add a tint effect to it. Perfect. And then we're going to go for levels. Wicked. And then we're just going to crush the blacks to something around here. Pull up our whites. And then we're going to add some contrast inside the scene to something like this. Wicked. And then what we're going to do is we are going to draw a mask inside of our image, something like this. All right, and this is going to be the matte that we're going to be using to create the relight, and then we're going to just pull up our mask over here, and we're going to feather this out a tad bit, something like this. All right. Maybe something like this will work for me. I don't think I'm going to have to animate it all, but hopefully I don't. And this would be pretty good. And what we'll do next is, I think we have it named over here, relight matte. We're going to go here now. And what we want to do is, because we have this here, that's not glowing, that's not light enough. So we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to pull up the reds over here. And on this layer, instead of that, we're going to add a fast box blur. We're going to spread out the pixels quite a bit on it. We're going to scale it up. We're going to bring it down to around over here. And we're going to use this as a track matte for the ground relight. And then we're going to change it to a Luma matte instead. And this is going to help actually show the light glowing on the floor as the explosion goes off. So if we take this off now, what you guys will see is it actually is lighting up the floor where we want it to for the matte. And like I said, for a scene like this, we're going to want to put this over here, something of this sort. Might look a little bit better. Take this off for a second and play with the mask, and we can play with the feathering properties to make sure that it spreads where we want it to. And then we can also play with this levels effect to get the contrast higher so that it only relights certain parts of the floor. And you guys can see if we take this off, I will show you in 2 seconds. Yeah, so this is on, this is what it's off, right? So you can see that it does help add realism to the glow that would emulate on the floor. It's just a matter of playing with these values until we find something that we like. And you want to make it a little more subtle because it is the daytime. You don't want it too obvious, but I think something around here should be pretty damn decent for what we're trying to do. And even then I would keep fighting a bit to add more contrast in certain places. Maybe around here. It may not seem like a lot, but those subtle things make a huge difference when you're trying to add that extra bit of realism to your edit. So as you guys can see, we have quite a bit of layers going on here. So the last thing I'm going to do is maybe comp all of these together. We're going to call this the final. We'll figure out where this is happening now. So over here, we're going to add an adjustment layer. We're going to call this negative, and we're going to add a quick frame before the explosion takes place. Bam. Okay, perfect. And then we're going to add a light burst over here. We're going to name this light burst. Perfect. Sorry, I should not have deleted this part. And then we are just going to put a invert effect here. And put a light burst effect here. And then we're going to choose this area here. And maybe we'll change it down to 50 for intensity. Perfect. And we're going to have something that looks like this. Yeah, just a little pop. Like a little bam. And that's before that relights and comes up. And then on this, I'm going to use one of my favorite things, which is ProductionCrate's Shake Script. This is completely free if you have an account with them, but I'll put a link to something description so you guys can go. But go to Jolt 3. We'll change the amplitude down just a tad bit so we don't have it going absolutely crazy. And frequency, we'll turn it down to 8. And let's see how this fares for us. If you press U, you can see where it's adding the keyframes here. So let's give that a second to load out. The comp we're working on is pretty damn heavy right now. Seems like we got some progress going there. All right. Yeah, I like that. And you got that little boom right there. Yeah, it looks pretty damn cool. And sometimes what I do also, for me to get a good look at where we're going with this is, yeah, I like that. And you could do other things like adding more lens flares into the scene, go back and tweaking and adjusting and stuff. But yeah, like in a nutshell, for me, this would be, we're going to call this letterbox, just for sake of doing it, show you guys what I do sometimes so I get a good idea. And I go to the rectangle, and then you can use CC Jaws to do this too, and then just invert it. And now we kind of got a better look at, let's put this over here. Let's get to around over here, and let's go over here. All right, so yeah, this is essentially just a quick little breakdown on a way that I would approach, or you can approach something like this too, to kind of get a similar effect. I hope you guys enjoyed this. There's going to be tons more we're going to be doing on this channel. And shout outs to all the creators that put out great stuff to follow, to make the information that I can pass on to you guys even possible. But yeah, this is just a quick way that I would go about compositing something like this. If you guys like it, remember to smash that like button, hit that subscribe button, comment down below on some stuff you want to see, ideas you guys have, and I'll get to it as soon as possible. But yeah, this is a community where we can all grow, exchange information, share, learn together. Man, grab whatever you have and get out there and create. And I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.